veterans have special exemptions that they may apply for as well. If you own or run a not-for-profit, under certain circumstances, if you're doing not-for-profit work there, you can also apply for a major exemption there. Good question, Natalie. Thank you. And like I said, I will leave these pamphlets. I'll put them back there at that table before I leave. Any other questions? Not even from behind me? Okay. Well, here is a sample bill. As you can see, it's actually my bill. Now, unfortunately, I'm not in the 3rd ward. I'm in the 4th ward, but the bill is the same between the two. You've got your township bill, your county bill, including the Forest Preserve, the Metrolink, the bus transit that I told you about, the airport. There are 4 townships that pay for that, and the Rock Island School District 41 is on there, the Black Hawk College Board, and we have a distinguished member with us as well, and then also the Rock Island City, with which we've got many dedicated servants with us, as you know. So every year we do what you had paid last year and what it is this year. I might be talking out of my element here, but with assessments coming up, it's a quadrennial year. Every 4 years, there's new, the assessor is charged with going to every property and reassessing everything just to make sure it's equal, there's equity. So that is coming up, actually. You will notice over the last several years, our neighborhoods may have changed a lot of people moving, a lot of homes going for sale and being bought very fast for very high levels. You might start to see that trickle into your tax bill over the next year or two, and that is the element of assessments. But that is the about 14 lines on that right side of that formulation. That's where you can find your fair market value. That's where you can find any exemptions that you're entitled to, any adjustments that the state has to make in case one of those levels are not up to par. And then we use that number, and based on the levy that the city council gives the county clerk, then the treasurer crunches the numbers, and you get that bill. I've got it in 2 amounts there, $1,894, you can see. So that is how that bill is calculated, what goes into it, and then how that pie would be divided. We do have a nice website that has been in, I think we've had it live for about 3 years now. Have any of you checked your property tax or your property records online with the County of Rock Island? We have a very nice tool that you can go in and see your records. You can see how many years you've paid, what each of every single year going back to 2014 was paid, and then also a nice actual pie, a pie chart of who is getting those cuts, who is getting those cuts of the money. Generally speaking, in the cities, about 50% goes to the school districts. About 25%, give or take, goes to the cities, about 12% to the county and the Forest Preserve, and then your smaller ones, the airport, Metrolink, the township, they're all about 4 or 5%, somewhere in there. So let's see, what else can I go? I've also circled, it's kind of hard to see, but when you do get your tax bill, please read the back. Please read the back. There are so many questions that can be answered for you on the back of the bill, including all the methods that you can pay. We have online payment, including by credit card and e-check. We obviously take in-person payments, cash, check, and now this year, something I started, credit card payments as well in the office, if you pay in the office. We have several banks, about 20 locations throughout the county, banks and credit unions that will take payments as well. And if you do not pay by that deadline, June 7th, like I mentioned almost 2 weeks ago, August 7th coming up next, September 7th, the 3rd installment, and November 7th, the final installment. If you don't pay by those dates, those installments do get a state-mandated interest penalty of 1.5%. So I know nobody likes to pay taxes. Perhaps you do, but I know it's just like a tough pill to swallow. But don't make it an even tougher pill by adding that interest to yourself. Like I said, there's about all but $4.3 million that has been collected so far. That is applicable now to interest penalty. Any questions based off of a sample tax bill I've shown?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I noticed on my property tax bill, the fair market value went up like 5%. So is that increase in the EAV or fair market value, was that like consistent across all of the county, or is it by the city you live in? Or?
That's a good question. I would be out of my pool to speak on it, but I will say, in general, I think across the county it was a little less than 5%. Now, some townships are selling homes much faster. The records have been processed much faster. You know, this was a housing boom that started
Right.
two and a half years ago. So a lot of that could be trickle already into your tax bill. That is the best explanation without being the assessment expert that I can give you right now. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Couldn't the county go to a more quarterly system instead of having August and September, right?
Yes, so that's a good question. His question was more exact quarterly payments, kind of like the water bill, I'm sure, is what you're thinking of. Actually, in the state of Illinois, there are only 2 counties that are allowed to have 4 payments, and that is Rock Island and Madison County near St. Louis. All the rest of them are only 2 installments. So what that came from was in the 80s when the unemployment rate was above 80% in this county, the people opted to go to the 4 installments. Unfortunately, I do not have any wiggle room on those dates, although I have looked into it. Unfortunately, they do have to be how they are prescribed by the state law. Good question, though. Any other questions? Okay. Here is just our contact information for our office. We're right next door at the county office building. We're on the first floor. As soon as you go through the security checkpoint, that's the first door to the right. We just got a brand new, beautiful renovation, new lighting, new ceilings. The place is looking great, climate controlled very nicely. If you happen to pay your taxes over the last 2 weeks, you'd probably notice that we did not have air conditioning during that heat wave. It's all set now. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will be good stewards of those renovations. But we are on that first floor. Our website is located on rockislandcountyil.gov. Our phone number, 309-558-3510. If you'd like to get right to the treasurer, just 3500, okay? That's just a little secret for all you in this room. That's your benefit for coming to my... and, of course, we do have email available. rockislandcountyil.gov, the best way to get a hold of us. And a lot of questions can be answered on there. We've got a nice pie chart that shows where your money's going and other good questions, links to the assessment information like has been asked tonight. Let me just tell you, I'm honored to be here. Thank you. It was when
Thank you for coming, Nick, and taking time from your busy schedule.
Well, no, I love it. I love it, and I wish I had more time with you, but I think I've probably gone over what we talked about, didn't we?
That's okay. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Yes.
Nick,
No,
we appreciate it.
Thank you all. I hope I can be of service to you in the future. Please don't hesitate to let me know.
Okay, great.
Okay, who we
Thanks,
handed the
Nick.
baton off to next?
We're going to pass the baton to Linda Barnes, our city
Okay,
finance
yes, yes.
director. Do I need to go up there? Would it be easier for you to go up there?
Fine here.
Okay, that's fine.
That's
Just
good.
I'll take the mic then, and she'll need the clicker thing. So, yes, so our finance director, Linda Barnes, is gonna give us an understanding of the city's portion of the property taxes, and then she's gonna do some high-level explanation of the city budget, our revenue, expenditures, our debt and liabilities as well. Linda?
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and I would like to say that I am a third ward resident as of last year. So, anyway, so we're going to start off with understanding property tax, and as Nick said, there are several taxing districts, so we're focusing. Can you hear me?
Can you bring your mic closer? And yeah.
So I'm going to focus on the city of Rock Island as the taxing district. So as outlined in the example, the city's portion represents about 26.56% of the total tax bill for the 22 levy, and that's payable in 23. The tax rate is at 2.76%, which means a property value of $100,000 would pay about $753 of the total tax bill. Okay.
Handouts are at the back table if you came in late.
Okay, so on the bottom of that, you see the $1 bill. So that's just another way of looking at the breakdown by taxing district. So the $1 represents 100%. So again, the city would get about 26.5 cents of that $1. So the final property tax levy. So last December, the city council approved the tax levy request of $15 million, a little over $15 million. After the county finished their calculations, it was about $1,600 higher. Okay, the bottom pie chart there is a graph that shows the majority of the levy will support fire and police pension contributions. That's at about 9.2 million or 61%. The general fund will receive about 1.37 million of that tax levy. The library will receive about 2.3 million. Parks and Recreation will receive slightly over 2 million. The remaining goes into the Public Benefit Fund to pay for debt-related expenses such as banking and financial services. So this chart depicts the history of the City of Rock Island property tax rate back to the mid-1980s. Can anybody think what you were doing in the mid-1980s? Those were good years. So as you can see, in the early 1990s, the rate reached a high point of 4.12%. Prior to the 2017 levy, the tax rate had remained very level for a decade. Okay, so next we're going to move over talking about revenues and expenses. So the chart below represents citywide revenue sources for all areas of operations. So that would include public safety, the library, parks, public works, pension funds, the MLK Community Center. So as noted, taxes make up about 33% of revenue, followed by charges for services such as utility charges, and that would include water, sewer, refuse, parks and recreation, fitness center memberships, and golfing fees, etc., would be considered charges for services. The property taxes for tax increment financing districts is also included in this total. So for 2023, revenue budget was approximately $146 million. Okay, so these charts depict citywide expenses totaling about $160 million. Personnel costs account for about 37%, followed by services at 20%. And that bottom chart is just another way of looking at expenses by departments. So the public works, which includes the majority of capital projects, represents the largest expense by department at 59, almost $60 million. Public safety, which includes fire and police, represents another $52 million. Okay, so the next slide looks at the general fund. So the general fund gets a lot of attention. It's considered the chief operating fund of the city. It's supported mainly by tax revenues, and as you can see from that chart, that includes property taxes, state and local taxes, also license and permits, grants, charges for services, fees, concessions and rent, investments, and transfers. So on the expense side, personnel costs, which includes public safety, streets, finance, administration, community economic development, IT department, those are the largest representation of expenses. And last but not least, the city uses debt to pay for capital improvement projects. As noted, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency loans are related to state mandated requirements for water and sewer services, or sewer systems. Right, so that's all I have, but I did want to mention that there's 2 upcoming events if you want to know more about the city's budget and finance. The 22 audit report will be presented to council this coming Monday, June 26th, and the fire and police pension actuary report will be presented August 14th. And also, if you want to really look at some budget summaries, we have the 2023 Budget Digest available on the city's website, and this is the first time that we have put that on the website. So a lot of good information. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or call.
Does anyone have any questions now for Linda? So can you summarize for us, Linda, I know you've got the chart of the debt service, but so what is our current debt? And I can't recall if you mentioned, I know on one of your slides, you mentioned our police and fire pension liabilities, and what are those totals?
Okay, so I think I did put that on there. I can read the small print from here. Okay, so as of December 22nd, the fire pension fund net pension liability was about $71 million, which is almost 26% funded. So looking at long-term, what that is saying is that that's what's available to fund the retirements. So the city's goal or state mandate is that we have to be 90% funded by 2040. So we are trying to work on that. The police pension fund liability as of December 22 is I can't read that tiny writing on here, I think 82 million, which is about 32% funded. So again, something that the city is definitely working on to increase those total funded liabilities, or reduce the liability.
Right, okay. Does anyone have any other questions on the budget or our property tax portion of the bill? Do you wanna?
That's all right, I can speak loudly.
Okay.
How are those 2 items currently being worked on?
As far as the liabilities,
Either one,
um,
pension or liability?
pension liabilities,
What's the current plans on those?
well, from a state perspective, the pension funds, what do we want to call it? It was mandated that all police and fire pension funds within the state of Illinois be pooled into 2 investments. So instead of like the Rock Island Fire Pension or Police Pension managing their own investments, it's all pooled together. So all the fire pensions are pooled together, and then all the police pensions are pooled together. And they're being managed by those, I don't want to call them state type boards.
Yes.
State
They have
boards.
Each of them
Yes.
has boards, and why that's important is, For years, when the individual cities had their own pension boards, the state restricted the way they could invest their money. And as a result, they got very low returns. Well, under the new consolidated boards, they've allowed them to invest their funds in a manner more similar to other pension plans, so you can get greater returns. Now, there's more risk with that, but with greater returns, those liabilities should be reduced over time. The largest source of income into your pension funds should be from investment returns. That hasn't been the case for police and fire for years, and that's why the payments are so high, and that's why the funded ratio is so low for cities.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on to our next presentation where we're going to talk about the ARPA or American Rescue Plan Act expenditures by Samantha Ganji, our ARPA program manager and our city clerk.
Yes. Let Tim get that going, and I'll take the clicker. Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am going to give a brief, high-level overview of the American Rescue Plan Act. I will also be giving a more detailed presentation to the City Council this coming Monday. I'm in the process of updating the website, but there's a plethora of information there as well if anybody's interested. So what is the American Rescue Plan Act? Most of you might already know that, but it was a $1.9 trillion federal rescue plan that was signed into law in March of 2021, and it supports governments by providing a substantial amount of resources to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that means, addressing economic fallout and laying the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. Of course, these funds are subject to United States Treasury guidelines. We received $26.5 million for the city of Rock Island. Unfortunately, roads are not considered eligible under Treasury guidelines. So what we've done is local governments were allowed to claim up to $10 million in lost revenue. And the benefit of the revenue replacement category, lost revenue replacement, is that allowed local governments to spend its ARPA funds on almost anything. There were a few restrictions, such as you can't pay into your pensions, you can't offset taxes, those kind of things. But that allowed cities to do projects such as roads or some of the others that wouldn't normally be covered under U.S. Treasury guidelines. So we divided those into restricted and unrestricted funds. So the city has $16.5 million in restricted funds that require rigorous reporting on a quarterly basis. And we took the $10 million and we call that unrestricted funds. Those are funds that I'm not reporting those rigorous reporting requirements. So that's the difference there. In June of 2022, last June, the City Council adopted 5 ARPA guiding principles. And what that was to help myself, all of the residents, city officials, guiding us on how we should spend that money. And we wanted to make sure those guiding principles were included. That helped us drive the survey. So if you all remember, I hope you all took it last July, we had a public survey. It was online, paper format. We had about 1,800 respondents, which is pretty good for that type of format. And we had 5 areas that people identified as priorities. So I'm going to talk about those. So there were 12 categories, and those were driven by the ARPA guiding principles as well as the Treasury, what was allowable under the Treasury guidelines. And what you all said was that the number one thing that was important was infrastructure. Oh, excuse me, I'm on the wrong slide. Excuse me. So as you can see there on that side, we spent a little over $14 million on infrastructure. We also spent about almost $3 million, parks, recreation, green space, neighborhoods. That was identified as an important thing in our city. Assistance to businesses. Public safety, law enforcement technology, and then we have mental health. Now, the mental health category, the city council, out of unrestricted funds, allocated $250,000 for mental health and $250,000 for homelessness. Now, we held focus groups of stakeholders in our community, whether it was residents, nonprofits, those types of stakeholders in Rock Island. And we found out that mental health and homelessness were very much intertwined. And so that's why I made that the $500,000 figure, because really it, addresses mental health, homelessness. They're very much intertwined. So we were able to, we haven't decided what to use those funds for yet. We do have them under restricted so that we don't have the time allocation the federal government holds us to for the restricted funds. So we're still deciding on what to do with those. I forgot to mention the total ARPA funds budgeted. So we're a little shy of 26.5 million, so we got a little contingency there. We've spent 6.22, which doesn't seem like a lot, but Rock Island, we started a little bit later in the ARPA process, which was to our advantage because we got to see what everybody else was doing. So we've only spent about that much, but we do have the $20 million budgeted or allocated towards specific projects. So that's where we're at as of this month of 2023.
And Samantha, could you share with everyone the deadlines that we have for allocating the funds and then actually spending the funds?
Absolutely. So all of the restricted funds we must have those allocated to specific projects by the end of 2024. And then all of the funds have to be expended by the end of 2026. Unrestricted funds, of course, we don't have a timeline on those. So we were strategic in where we placed some of those projects. That's why the mental health component was an unrestricted. That way it didn't tie us to a specific date. There's a couple other projects that either weren't eligible, and I'll go over those in a second, or that we decided to move under the unrestricted so we didn't have that time frame. Okay, so if we want to look at infrastructure categories, number one on the survey, and here's the various projects. I won't read them all, but you can kind of get a sense of city software. We are in the dark ages, so it's a much needed. It's going to help all of you all out tremendously with paying your bills and getting permits and so forth and so on. The Parkway, of course, that's roads, that's unrestricted. The parking garage, unrestricted. We haven't allocated any money yet for road repairs. We don't know where those projects will be. We just allocated the $1 million. Downtown Rock Island project, that'll have infrastructure. Augustana, the sewer replacement. Broadband is included in infrastructure. We've got, of course, our advanced meter reading, which is an awesome project that is going to bring our meters, so we won't have somebody have to walk around and check everybody's water meter. This will be all done, digitally, and we can have moved to a monthly water billing system eventually. So, brought to us partly by ARPA. Of course, we've got a couple of pump stations and backwater generator, water treatment plant, and those kind of things. So that totals about 14 million, give or take. Assistance to businesses, that was number 2 on the survey. That did qualify for restricted funds, however, we decided to keep that under the unrestricted funds, so we didn't have to hold ourselves to that time frame. So if we have businesses in 2027, we still have funds left, they can still get those funds. And I don't know if you've all heard about our exciting new programs. We've got GRIT, Growing Rock Island Together, and that's structured as a 50% loan, 50% grant program for businesses. Of course, if you know anybody interested, they can talk to our Community and Economic Development Department or our DARI. And then also Property Enhancement Program, that was our facade program. We've expanded that, and now it's called PEP. So very easy acronyms to remember. And those launched here in June. So those are new programs for our businesses. The next thing, number 3 on the survey, was parks, recreation, green space neighborhoods. Of course, the Hauberg, the new library, RIFAC, Highland Springs, all of the different parks there. The STEAM Lab at MLK, that's a lot of you familiar with STEM. They add the A for arts. So that's going to be new to our MLK Center And then also, we've got the West End revitalization going on right now in our first ward in our West End. And that's about 2.9 million. The next category is public safety, which was number 4 on the survey. We're getting new ambulances. We replaced weather sirens, so we got some cool new equipment. I don't know if all of you have heard in the news, we've got some license plate readers and some new cameras up around the city. That's due to ARPA. We are giving our police officers, we've got a recruitment retention going on to address our public safety. We've also got, we're eventually getting some new emergency services radio, video recording system, just to support our body cameras and those type of things. So we got a lot of things going on there. That's about 3.399 million towards public safety. And then mental health, I already briefly touched on that. That homelessness and mental health together equal 500,000. And then I will touch on real quick what the other was outside of those 5 categories, right? Housing. Of course, we're going to do something with housing. We've already contributed to the land bank, part of that rehab. We still got some funds there, demolitions, getting rid of those blighted properties. Infill housing, we still haven't had a plan on that. That's an unrestricted. So the city's currently looking into how we want to expend those. Again, we're not on that time constraint. So we, of course, ARPA-related administration, myself, the ARPA program manager, those kind of things. We, the city did lose revenue, so we allocated $1 million there. Tourism. We're trying to figure out how we can aid our tourism. We actually have a meeting about it later this week. That's also unrestricted. The Sunset Marina, $1 million. And then we got, we're in the process of getting new snowplows. I don't know if they've actually arrived yet, but they're ordered. Though next year, everything's on back order. So that was about 4.3. So that's where our 26.5 million comes from. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, West End, let's talk, what are you doing? What's the revitalization for, what are you giving it, 100,000?
Yes, so the West End revitalization is, a consultant was hired, and I might have the city manager chime in, he might know a little bit more about it. In, I think it was 2019, it was an initiative by the John Deere Foundation to help. They hired a consultant to figure out how we can, revitalize and perk up our West End. And so out of that came a recommendation, and we're currently working on that. There's a board, and then there's working groups. I think Dave is here. He can maybe speak to it better than I can, or City Manager Todd Thompson. So that's still in the works. It's very early stages from what I understand.
Where do people get information about this?
It's on the MLK website. If you, yep, it's on the MLK website, which can be accessed from our city website as well.
West End revitalization.
Yep.
Information's on the MLK website, not on the city website.
You can access the MLK website from the city website. Yep, sorry. Should have clarified
There'll be
that.
some discussion about it at the study session on Monday, so if you're interested, you could tune in there too.
And that's at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, not to call you out, Dave, but Dave does serve on our, I think it's the financial or the economic group. There's like 5 or 6 groups, I believe. Come on up.
Good evening. I don't have a whole lot to report. The group I'm with is the Economic Development Group, where we're going to try and do some things in the West End. I grew up in the West End, lived in the West End most of my life, so they asked me to be on their committee. We just are starting the ball. We've only met twice, the group I'm with, so there's not a whole lot going on yet, but we have some ideas, so.
So the boundary is, it's primarily for just First Ward. So it does, there's a defined, I don't have the map, but again, I think Jerry Jones is presenting. But it primarily it covers those census tracts in the First Ward. A lot of that's data-driven, of course, by our census tracts, which are primarily first, second, there's a couple other roads.
From my vantage point, the West End is part of Rock Island. And so if any of you have any ideas on, hey, here's how we can improve this neighborhood, this area, certainly feel free to call Jerry Jones. I'm sure Jerry would be willing to accept any input that you might have. You can contact my group, should be on there who the leaders of the groups are, so love to hear from you. Vince, we go way back.
I was at a
Good seeing
meeting
you.
this afternoon with the Active Club at the King Center, and they passed out a sheet about the West End Revitalization Committee, and they 4 committees, and they haven't quite filled the positions with economics and
Housing.
Also understood that Thurgood Brooks has been hired as the coordinator of the project.
Any other questions about our ARPA monies? Holly?
The 250K that's going for the aid to tourism, is that something that Rock Island's gonna use, or is that just gonna go to the CDD?
No, that's very, oh, excuse me. That's very specific just to Rock Island tourism, absolutely. Actually, it was Alderwoman Gilbert and then Alderman Dylan Parker and Todd and I that have been, trying to decide kind of what to do to bring it to the larger council. We did have a focus group meeting, and we had all the Rock Island stakeholders involved, the various tourism, Botanical Center, those types of organizations, yes.
So the stakeholders who participated in our focus group gave us a lot of great ideas for what they would like to see done. The consensus was that we need some Rock Island-focused tourism efforts. So we're in the process now of trying to figure out exactly how best to accomplish that and what are some of the initial things that need to be done, like conducting an inventory of all of our stakeholders that are tourism-based or tourism assets, that kind of thing, getting a website going, et cetera. So we are working on that. Yes?
Several years ago, well, perhaps 4 years ago, there was a failed initiative to take a grant that was awarded for Black History Trail, which Rock Island has a vital and, well, not vital, but it has a substantial history to tell. And the grant was aborted because it did not involve local, the grant got pulled back because local families, local people with now stakeholders were not involved. I would encourage that those stakeholders should be.
That wasn't true. That
Excuse
wasn't
me?
true. That was not true.
It's not true?
No, it's not.
Okay.
There were local stakeholders that were not right.
Okay.
It was aborted because the
Council voted it down?
yes, but it did not, I was part of it.
So is there a documented history someplace?
Oh, yeah.
Data that can that be shared with the city? Because I think as tourism, that would be a very important component to look at.
No, thank you. So I have a destination marketing piece called QC Passport that is centered right here in Rock Island. And I had worked in collaboration with Charles Pearson, who is a Iowa historian who has developed the African American Civil Rights Trail throughout the state of Iowa. And it was through the city and their collaboration with Charles and myself that they decided to apply for a grant through the National Park Service. There were a few individuals that decided that we should not get the grant and that they wanted it, and so the grant was awarded. And so those funds that were already given to the city of Rock Island were given back to the National Park Service. And I don't know if anything has been done with that piece since then. As far as QC Passport goes, We are on the cusp of launching 24 new destinations throughout the Quad Cities. 10 of them are here in the city of Rock Island. Visit Quad Cities is also adding another 2 to the city of Rock Island. And St. Mary of the Immaculate Conception is also adding a destination, as well as the Rock Island Library, who is celebrating their 175th anniversary. So there will be a total of 14 new historic destinations in the city of Rock Island by the end of this year.
Thank you. Any other questions on ARPA? These have been all great questions. So our last presentation tonight, before we just get into a general Q&A, we have representatives here from our partnership with Augustana College, because we are working on a city-led service line replacement project that has been mandated by the state. And we have Dr. Michael Reisner and Dr. Kimberly Murphy, as well as Jason Upton, our city's utilities superintendent, here to talk about this project and the survey that they need all of us to complete. So, the microphone is yours.
So I'm Michael Reisner. I'll let Jason jump in. So I'm one of the professors at Augustana. We've been partnered since about last September. This is a new law that was put in place late last summer, and it basically requires, in a nutshell, that the city of Rock Island inventory all the remaining lead service lines and come up with a replacement plan, including a rough idea of how they're going to finance it over the next 10 to 15 years. So I would say the first 6-7 months we were partnered, we worked with the city to inventory all the information they had going back to 1800s to try to get a revised inventory, and that was submitted in April. And so from there, why we are here, we need your help. So after putting all that information in, about 90% of the service lines that are in Rock Island, we still don't know what they're made of. So they can be made of copper, galvanized metal, or lead. So right now what we're doing is we have a massive effort, and this, I would call this a questionnaire. It's not even a survey. It's like a 1 or 2 minute ask. What we need is there's 2 ways we're trying to identify all these unknown pipes. They're buried in the ground. We don't want to dig holes in everyone's yard. So we're trying 2 things. We're asking residents to help us verify themselves what's in their basement. Really, the only place to see these pipes without disturbing the soil in people's yards is where the main pipe comes into your house, into your meter. So there's a really simple process using a pretty simple scratch test to determine is it copper, lead, or galvanized, and you can submit it on a survey, and it goes straight into a geodatabase that we can track in real time. There's a really easy option. If you don't want to go in your basement, you can click on I need help, and within 24 hours, Peyton Heisch, who's sitting here with us, will reach out, and we are doing that today. We went to 3 or 4 houses today. Our students, we have a team of researchers, they will come help you verify your material and get the survey completed. And if you haven't seen them, we're actually in Ward 3 right now, is knowing that we won't get enough people to self-verify. We have a team of students doing research. It's part of a research project for them. They're public health students, they're economic students, they're environmental studies students. We have teams, and we've basically, ward by ward, we've divided the city up into census blocks. Those are roughly city block size units, and we've kind of carefully selected a sample of those where we're doing the old school political canvassing, door to door. So if someone happens to open their front door, they get to talk to one of our students. Some of you are smiling because maybe they went to your house. They'll help you, or you can go verify for them. It takes about 4 minutes from when they knock on your door to when we're done. Or if no one's home, we leave a postcard that's nice and bright and yellow. And people have been, actually, we're getting a pretty good response for houses where we just leave the postcard. There's a QR code. You can scan it in your phone, or there's a link on the city's website. And you can do this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops, depending on how much stuff is piled between your meter and where you need to get to the pipe. So that's really what we're doing right now. I would say this part of the process is critical because we need to have as accurate an estimate of the number of lead service lines and where they're located in the city as we revise the inventory, because from there, the city has to come up with a replacement plan and come up with a plan for how to finance a big capital project, but there's many years to do it, but we really need an accurate number. And the Illinois law, whether you like it or not, as of April of 2024, if something's called unknown, by law, it's considered lead. So we don't want a bunch of unknowns out there. That's going to overestimate the number of lead service lines. It's going to make the problem look bigger than it really is. So getting that accurate number, really, residents just helping us verify is really important. Or if you need help, that's what our team of students for, and they can help people verify, or they can come in and verify if you need help going downstairs. So you'll see the city sent out a water quality report, and there was a link to the survey there. You're going to see postcards. You're going to see flyers. If you see a yellow thing sticking on your door, that means we were in the neighborhood. And that means actually you're in a high priority block, because we specifically picked that block because of the range of homes that are in that block and that it's spatially dispersed across the entire city. We want to make sure we don't miss parts of the city. So if you see a postcard, your block is identified as high priority for us. So what else did I miss, Jason? You want to add anything?
There's some flyers back in the back.
We have, we brought some of the flyers and some of the postcards. And also, if you go on the Rock Island website, there's more information also just about the project and the law and lead and all kinds of great information. So.
And those stay after the meeting too. The team will stay after the meeting if you want to talk with them one-on-one. So does anybody have any questions about this project that the city is doing in partnership with Augustana?
Bravo, sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you. What's the time frame?
Good question.
So a revised inventory is due next spring, and the initial replacement plan and the financing plans are due next April. So that's the first stage. This will be, they can be revised every year. I think the final plans are 2027, but the big push is there's another inventory that has to be revised by next spring, and then that's when the first replacement and financing plan have to be put in place.
Great.
In terms of getting help, our students are here in the summer. This is our golden time to collect data. So between now and the end of August we're going to make a big push. You'll see it as at the Lincoln concert series at Lincoln Park. You're going to see students there. We'll be at events, so you'll probably get sick of seeing Augustana students roaming around. But this is our chance to push because it's a research project for them in the summer. So.
Great.
Our hope is to be towards the end of July, first part of August. Since we're utilizing the Augustana students, this is when they've got their summer break, and so they're doing this as a summer project to help us out with this identification. So hopefully by the end of July, we've got, people have taken the survey, submitted the information, then we can look at the information. So at the end of July, middle of August, we're looking at then starting to move our efforts to, okay, how do we replace these? Looking at the economics of Rock Island, of how we can receive any kind of grants. We put in and received a grant for $50,000 for this inventory. So that's why we reached out to Augustana. We got this grant through the Illinois EPA. It's a forgivable grant. So that's what we're using for this inventory and for this research and push towards understanding what our inventory is.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Oh, go ahead, Samantha.
So I have one. So obviously you want to get 100% for your response rate, obviously, but do you guys kind of have a projected response rate? And then what's the plan to address those the unknowns and those kind of things? Do you guys have a?
So we're kind of going a little bit of everything. We know response rates can be low. So we actually, we got the initial water quality report out. We did a joint press release. If people were listening, I think it got picked up on one of the news stations.
It did.
We also met with Martin Luther King Center, and we've been to 5 churches. So we're kind of working through the churches to get the word out. You know, we're coming to events like this. We've been canvassing, and we've been surprised at the response rate to the postcards we leave on people's door, because it is a quick ask. We're not asking you to do a 20-minute survey. That response has been higher. I think the last time I tried to roughly calculate it was like 10-12%. So we're doing that. We've got some postcards. We haven't decided whether we're going to go all in and do a postcard for each ward. I think we're going to wait and see what the responses are. So we're trying a whole bunch of strategies. We know we're not going to get all the unknowns, so that's why the students are scientifically sampling. We're going to use a predictive spatial model to make an educated guess on the remaining unknowns. So that's kind of why we designed the sampling plan, and it's pretty powerful software. But we would like to have, there's just shy of 13,000 unknowns, I think. We would like to have 4,000 data points if we could get it. So that's what we're pushing to. I think we're sitting at like 300 right now, but we're hoping that people just see the postcards that we can get up there.
Awesome. What an awesome partnership.
John?
Well, if you find lead pipes, what are you gonna replace them with?
So I'll let Jason answer that one.
So, you know, when you look at the history of lead was a good idea at one time, just like plastic and PVC. Ordinance in Rock Island is copper. Galvanized is on the list too because it's been shown that if you've had lead downstream of galvanized with the properties of galvanized, it will retain lead particles. So that's the reason why galvanized is on there. It isn't because it has any harmful effects. It's because it could contain it if lead was downstream at one point. Replacement, probably copper. The tried and true would be copper. Unfortunately, there's costs related to copper. A lot of cities are starting to go to PVC and plastics, but there's also now some new studies that are out there that are saying, hey, plastic's not as good as we once thought it was. So, you know, I think copper's kind of that steady one that has been shown to work well as a water line.
I know some schools in Chicago have had a big problem. They've got lead in there.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of conferences and a lot of meetings on this. You know, this all come to fruition back when, you know, we had Flint, Michigan. Everybody's heard of Flint. Outside of the fact that, you know, the areas that it affected probably made it more noteworthy. But as a resident, if you have lead in your home, it's not a death sentence. It's not as bad. You can flush your line. If you flush your line properly, most of us do that anyway. If you go to your sink, I mean, very few of us will stick the cup right in there unless you're really pinching pennies and wanting to conserve water. Usually you'll wait till it cools off a little bit. That's what you're doing. You're flushing that water out, getting the main water that's out in the mains. We're not really concerned in Rock Island about our mains. Our mains, we do have some lead, but it's in joints, so it's not coming in contact with the water. Where the water, you have that transferring of the lead to the water is when it's stagnant in your pipes. We do testing in Rock Island. Every 3 years, we're on a lead program, a testing program. So we do test known lead residents that are set onto this program. And we don't have any kind of extreme, we don't have high levels of lead that are showing up in our drinking water. We do add a phosphate, which helps coat the pipes. I think that's a helpful factor. And our water is not as corrosive. You know, Flint had some factors where they changed their water source, and it was more corrosive, and then it did, you know. So there was a lot of mistakes that were made there. Ultimately, now we're, you know, taking some action, and they're kind of, the time frame is, I think it's up to like 30 years to replace all the lead. So once we get this part, it's very important to get this, as Michael said, to get this survey completed. One, it helps us with identifying our lead services and knowing what we have out there, which will help us when we go apply for, hopefully there'll be some more grants. We got this one, the first one, which is solely for inventory, but hopefully the state will be releasing some more grants. So if we have an accurate number and we have a definite plan moving forward, then hopefully that would come in for some grants. How we disperse that and how we replace it, that's still what we're working on with Augustina, coming up with a plan of replacement. If anybody doesn't know what lead, I can set this back there too. This is what a lead pipe is. I'd hate to have been a plumber back when they were installing this. This is pretty heavy, you know, but it's also pretty soft and pretty pliable. So the test that they've got in the survey is easy. It's with a key or a coin. You can scratch it off, and then report if it's lead. Copper will look like a penny, so you'll have that copper color. Galvanized is a little more tough. It's got a metallic to it, so a magnet will stick to it. So magnet and a key, and you can detect what kind of service line you have pretty easily. But in Rock Island, those are the three prominent ones because we don't allow plastic here.
Any other questions on our project? Okay, so now we're going to open it up to just general questions, comments, and we have our city manager, Todd Thompson, our deputy police chief, Tim McLeod, and our public works director, Mike Bartels, as well as our speakers here. So we'll open it up for questions. I'll run around with the microphone. Anybody?
Questions are for you, Missy. You two over there. Yeah, the city manager. There we go. I like that.
You gotta have some questions, please.
Hi, Tom Sparkman, 1600 18th Avenue. I'd like the city to consider the restoration of the greenhouse in Longview Park, which I noticed was the first slide when you opened the Rock Island City website there. There's a company that was started in 1850 called Lord and Barnum, and they're still in existence, and that's where Rock Island bought the greenhouse from in 1936. You can still order parts from them. So I'm going to be working with some other individuals, hopefully with the city too, to see what can be done as a group effort to a combination of volunteers, city administration, city council, maybe grants out there that I know are available. But this is like early. I just started thinking about this a couple of days ago. But I do know it's possible for us to buy the materials we need to restore the greenhouse. And the greenhouse is a significant structure. People, I live across the street from that park, and you see people come there quite frequently taking wedding photos and whatnot. So just want to throw that out there.
Thanks.
Piggybacking on to your comments, the offices in Longview Park, I believe it's for the park offices, are a shamble. They don't have gutters. There's a flat roof. There's a lot of leak. And I think it should be given attention. I've called multiple times over the past 5 years, but that building's in tough shape. I have another question in regards to, I believe it was 2 years ago, the city initiated a community task force on police-public interaction, and we really haven't, I don't think I've heard anything, and I do my best to try to keep track of the news.
Are you referring to the Police Community Relations Commission, or is that something different, Deputy?
No, I think that's what you're referring to, correct?
I don't know what the specific term is at this point, because I haven't heard about it since it got initiated. I don't know how frequently they meet. We'd like to have an update, please.
Well, I can't provide you too much of an update. There is a commission that's been in existence for about a year and a half now. They meet typically once a month, is their schedule. They did get a Facebook page going, I believe. Part of their mandate is to work with us for some community relations building, which we are doing. We attend all those meetings. They've also kind of help facilitate the process for filing complaints through, if anyone doesn't feel comfortable going to the police department to file a complaint, they can go through the commission and I think through the Martin Luther King Center. But beyond that, I don't really have a whole lot more that I could provide directly from that.
Isabel Pina actually is a member of that commission, so she could, sorry, Isabel, she could speak to it. Also, Tim's got our website up. All their minutes and agendas are also on the website, which would give you kind of an insight into what they've been talking about or what they've been meeting. I know it's very early. Isabel, I don't know if you want to say anything on it, but. Tomorrow at 5:30, MLK, right? It's the third Tuesday of the month. So, and that's of course open to the public, so anybody wondering or have any questions, feel free to attend. And then there's the information as well, so.
Oh, yeah, Police Community Relations Commission. And there's their agenda for tomorrow night.
The last 3 months or so, Rock Island has been demolishing older buildings. I would cite the old Central Junior High. And at one time, the fire station at Douglas Park was supposed to be made into a pro football museum. Why are all these older buildings being knocked down when they could maybe be used for something else?
Question. Todd, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. With each building, a different entity was responsible for their care and upkeep and ultimately the demolition. The building most recently demolished by the city was the old firehouse. And, when you get old buildings that get deteriorated in a certain condition, they become so costly to rehabilitate. And that was really the point that we found ourselves in, was the cost to rehabilitate that building just to make it basically code compliance was $600,000+. So it's just a challenge to do that, to rehab them when they get to that condition. Miles, did you want to comment on it as well?
I love a mic. Hello, everyone. I'm Miles Brainerd. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director. I believe the other two properties you're referring to, as the city manager pointed out, were under the care of other entities. Obviously, the county courthouse, I believe, is one of the other ones you're referring to. The county tore that down. The old school, the school district tore that down. And as the city manager said, the firehouse property, there was not a feasible path forward. There had been many different investigations and opportunities for people to come forward with plans. We even had a last-ditch kind of call for proposals. Nothing came forward that was viable.
You guys all know that I started a thing called QC Passport because I have a passion about saving the culture and saving the history. And I moved to this area from Minnesota because I love this area. The history here is rich, it's deep, and if we don't protect our history, we're going to lose it, period. What I know has happened in a lot of other cities is that there have been moratoriums on buildings coming down after they're so old. So maybe there's something like a moratorium for buildings that are 100 years old or 125 years old, that they're not allowed to be torn down, that there is a process to let the public know that they're in distress, and that there are things that need to be done. I had no idea that that was the situation with the firehouse. If there was something that we could have done jointly as a city to try to save that, that would have had a much better outcome. Another one, some other cities have also put together and pooled funds to make a portion of their budget go towards these older buildings that are such an important piece of our history and our culture. That could be something else that we could do. These aren't the only buildings that are in danger. There's a lot of buildings throughout the city of Rock Island that, that are private or public and that are in a lot of trouble. And if we don't do something about them quickly, we're going to lose who we are as a city. So that would be my suggestion. I would love to see this taken up more seriously. I would love to be able to talk to some people about this. Because of the field I'm in, I happen to know a few contractors, and I happen to know some other folks that are in historic preservation that could really help with this issue. I just don't know where to go, and we quite frankly don't know who to talk to or who would be interested in seeing what we can do to save these buildings. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. Kevin Holt. I live at 1248 36th Avenue. Jesus, coming up on 6 years there already. I'm originally from Hillsdale, Illinois, north end of Rock Island County. I have a question. This is kind of intimidating, lots of stuff on a paper. I know the folks in budget, they look at this every day. I'm just showing up and looking at it for about 30 minutes here, so I have some questions. First of all, thanks for the police department. Thanks for Public Works folks. Keeps us safe here and keeps our roads probably in the best shape you can with the budget that you have. But I have a question. This indicates revenues, 145 million roughly. It says expenditures, $159 million. I know in my household that wouldn't work for very long. That wouldn't work for very long. I also noticed the debt on the other side here. P&I, $148 million. With a declining population in Rock Island, what the heck are we going to do with that? It just seems to continuously spiral. And I know, as a citizen as well, the guy from Rock Island County talked about who wants to pay taxes. Nobody wants to pay taxes. But unfortunately, I want a police department to keep my city safe. I want somebody working in Public Works to keep the snow off in the wintertime, keep them so the potholes don't tear up my vehicle and my tires. And I have an elected official that represents me in trying to balance all of that with the city manager. So, but what overall is, we talk about all the good things here and everyone has reported what we're doing, but I'm sure there's lots of skeletons in the closet here. And as a citizen, I have no idea what those are. I have absolutely no idea. I know water is probably one of them. I also depend on clean water. We're talking about lead pipes here in the city of Rock Island. But that water that comes out of the river has to be treated and processed, and I know that costs lots of money as well. So the basic services of a city that keeps folks living here instead of jumping over the river to live in Bettendorf, some other area they deem to be better. I happen to love Rock Island. I like living here. But I also want to make sure that those basic services that I depend on are going to continue to be there. And I don't understand how that's going to work with a deficit, a budget, and lots of debt continuing to rack up and trying to pay for these big infrastructure projects. I know that is it's complex paper, complex problem, and so I don't expect someone to have an answer specifically, but how does that work? How does that work in a city like Rock Island? Because I've saw many other municipalities across the country continue to spiral in a downward cycle when their population is declining, their tax base is declining as well. Again, I don't know what the answer is, but is there any insight in that as well? Higher taxes, how do you get more revenue? Higher taxes. Nobody wants higher taxes, they're going to jump across the river. So selling more, buying more bonds, that creates more debt, it still has to be paid for. So what's the formula to fix all of that?
Todd, do you want to address how the city balanced its budget for 2023 with that $14 million deficit?
Yeah, cities are required to have a balanced budget. A balanced budget essentially equals revenues plus funds on hand have to equal expenditures. A lot of our budget, as you've seen, relates to capital projects, and there are many cases where you'll put aside money to save up to do a project. So in the water fund, you may save up, millions of dollars in order to do a project. Some of that is that gap between expenditures and revenues. General fund is the same case. We've had a number of years where we might budget a deficit and we've actually seen a surplus at the end of the year. So you build a fund balance and you keep a certain percentage of that on reserve, but the amount over that you can budget in future years. So that helps fill that gap too. So even though you see a deficit, it's not really deficit spending because you're filling the difference between revenues and expenditures with available funds that you've saved. Not unlike a family, when you go to buy a car, you might save up the money and buy a car. Well, so you had it in the bank. Your second question about debt, the city has a high debt burden. There were things that were done in the past that added to that that weren't productive, and that's unfortunate. Our strategy is not to issue any debt unless we absolutely have to. And when I say have to, those will probably relate to water projects. As indicated, we need to address the lead service line problem. If we replace, under the law, 7% of our lead service lines a year, that's $1.5 million. That money has to come from water ratepayers because that's how the enterprise funds will work. In addition to the lead service line challenge in the water world, you may have heard of PFAS. Eventually, we're going to have to treat PFAS in the water, and that can be very, very expensive as well. So there are challenges in the waterfront. Enterprise fund is different than a general fund. It's paid for entirely by rates from ratepayers. It's a standalone fund. Cities are facing challenges. Expenditures are growing faster than revenues in many cases. Part of the strategy has to be not just raise taxes, we'd like to avoid that at all costs, but you can grow the tax base through economic development, and that's part of our strategy and part of what we're trying to be more proactive about and put more resources toward, is to grow the tax base so we don't have to raise taxes. On the other hand, you can manage your expenses by prioritizing how you spend your money, investing in things that are your priorities, and maybe eliminating some things that aren't priorities in order to save money. So there are a number of strategies to balance that and that don't involve raising taxes, because that's I'm sure that's not anything anybody wants to see. Did you want to comment on anything in addition, Linda?
I think you did a pretty good job, but we're getting ready to move into the 2024 budget. So one of our commitments is to, address any type of, deficit or negative fund balances per department. So we really will be looking at those and, just letting departments know we need to make an effort to keep expenses down or increase revenue. So that's very important to us.
I'd like to piggyback on Kevin's comments about the deficit. And an article that I saw a year or so ago has always been in the back of my mind, and I'm just going to share this with you. This is about a school district in Batesville, Arkansas, and they had a $250,000 annual budget deficit, and by using an empty property, they built a solar panel field, and they have turned that into a $1.8 million surplus. And then with that money, they gave their teachers each a $15,000 a year raise. And as we sit here, you know, I'm kind of cold. I see everybody else with coats on and everything, and I think about our utilities and what it costs to run a city and this pension money and, you know, something, you know, you just have to think outside the box maybe. I mean, you have that property down on 11th Street, our Walmart property. I mean, that's pure sun right there. And it would be neat to see our city be forward-thinking into the future. When we go on our highways, we see the windmill fields and going, you know, and I just think about that. It just seems like there's money there. We need to save money rather than figure out how we're going to pay for this, you know? You could save in certain areas and that could generate money and take care of some of these debts. So that was just one thing I wanted to bring up. I think it's a very interesting article if you have time to look into that. It was Batesville, Arkansas School District, and they put in 1,500 solar panels. Another thing about the intersections in Rock Island, mainly like the 30 on Blackhawk Road, 38th Street, 30th, 24th. I think those intersections, there's been like multiple accidents, and they just get kind of cleaned up. Not the best. You still see car parts and broken glass and pieces of turn signal pieces. And I just think our intersections and the cleanliness of our city is so important. I am seeing a big improvement in some areas, but I think our city needs to clean up those intersections, some of our main intersections, just for appeal.
Yeah, thank you. We have been working on improving that in all areas of the city. We've been focusing on 11th Street. Obviously, we're hoping to get development in that area, and so we've been focusing on cleaning up that corridor. You mentioned Blackhawk Road and 38th Street intersections, 24th Street. Blackhawk Road is actually maintained and maintenance is completed by the state of Illinois, so city personnel would not be going down there and picking up car parts. Not to say that we couldn't, and so we can send some guys down there and see what can be cleaned up now, but the day-to-day maintenance of Blackhawk Road and those intersections
Right.
is the requirement of the state.
I understand that, and you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And then just one other thing, I'm sorry. So I heard in the neighborhood, well, we had a stolen car in our neighborhood this last weekend. And then also about the deer. Did you hear about the deer?
The baby deer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long it laid there?
Well, I called on it. When I got the call, I called the non-emergency police department number Saturday morning. And I can't remember if when I went out, Sunday or Monday, that I noticed it was gone. So I don't know how long it took to pick up, but it was the weekend.
I think Brian ended up picking it up, Gustafson.
Oh, Brian did?
Yeah, because it laid there so long. But it was shot by the police department. That's what I was told. It was shot by the officer to, you know.
So the deer had been struck by a car and
Yes.
then it had to be euthanized, is that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not aware of that. Usually, depending on the size of the deer, yeah, we can't stick it in the squad car.
Well,
so
right. I think it laid there, though, till the middle of the next day in the afternoon, and then a neighbor came and picked it up. I think that should have been taken care of probably that night, or I don't know, but
yeah,
just bringing that up.
I'm not familiar with what happened with that particular call for service.
I was out of town when that happened, but I did get a call first thing Saturday morning about it, because it was literally right across the street from my
Right.
house. So I did call on it, you
It's
know.
just sad, you know?
Well, yes, it was very sad, and it was very tiny. But I didn't expect that anybody would clean it up, because I don't know if we have any personnel on the weekend to do that kind of thing.
Right.
We do. So if we're made aware of it, Public Works is made aware of it, we have people on standby 24/7. So we could have brought somebody in, they respond within an hour, and we would have picked it up.
It was just
and
the
disposed of it.
communication was just off between the incident and it going to the next person to have that. I don't know. Just some neighbors were talking, and they were kind of disturbed by seeing this baby deer laying there for so long. And then, you know, it's right on the street corner. I mean, so, anyway, I think maybe it's just a communication thing.
Yeah, I'll
with-
take a look and see where the ball was dropped on that one, see if there was something that happened with communication on that.
Thank you.
So, oh, somebody else have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here a second. This paper's down. My name is Patrick Cunningham. I live on 21st Street, 3500 block in Rock Island. Not related to the good doctor that some of you might have known, but we are friends of the family. So I'm looking here, and I just want to be clear that I'm reading this right, okay? Because I'm just looking at this information now. I'm talking about total revenues, $145,922,818, and expenditures of the bottom graph here. If I'm reading this right, $159,907,156, which is roughly, if you round up the numbers, about a $14 million deficit. Is that correct? Okay. And if I read the debt on the next page, the bottom square, looks like 148,476,457 into years from 2023 to 2040. Is that 18 years? Am I correct? Is that the right number of years that I'm quoting there? Okay. So am I correct when I say that there's $14 million deficit?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay, help me out here then.
Yeah. It's not a deficit if it's funded.
I'm sorry?
It's not a deficit if it's funded. There's a difference between revenues and expenditures.
Oh, sure. Okay,
That's
I'm not a financial
yeah,
person.
That's
That's why I'm
filled by
asking.
money that you've saved, so I just want to clarify.
Okay, how is that funded? Where does that come from?
Linda might have a breakdown, but one thing you have to remember is we have $26 million in ARPA funds, some of which we budgeted in that year.
Okay.
So that's an example of a source
Right.
of funding to fill that gap.
Okay, and if you take the debt into those 18 years, okay, the 148 million, including principal and interest, comes about roughly 8 million to something average per year. Is that correct? I mean, 148 million, 476,457 divided by 18 years? Am I correct here? I guess nobody's
And what was
challenging me.
what was your question again?
My question is, that's another, well, you're telling me the $14 million difference is funded, okay? Now, what about the $8 million average over the 18 years? Is that funded?
Yeah, no, it's included in the budget.
Okay, well, I'm just
Yes.
asking the questions out here.
Debt is, yeah, it's funded by different, it has different funding sources. So when you look at all those different debts that are listed, for example, IEPA loans, those are funded by
Water. and
user
sewer-
fees.
Sewer user fees.
Yeah,
Yep.
that takes care of those. Over on the governmental side, those expenses are normally paid with gaming tax revenues for a lot of those. TIF districts tend to pay for their, own loans also. So there are, and whenever we issue debt, we have to have a funding source. We have to show what the funding sources are for those.
All right. Okay, and you have to excuse me, it's the first time I'm
No,
dealing
that's
with
okay.
this information.
No, that's fine.
Problem. Glad to answer your question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out also that, when the city manager was talking about, the balanced budget and deficit, so as of the end of '22, overall, the city had $61 million available in cash. Fund balances, well over that amount, so there was sufficient cash to offset the differences between what you see as revenue and expenses.
Kevin, I think, had another question. No, Kevin? Okay. Anyone else have any questions? So Mike, I don't know if you want to just bring us up to, I can't remember the year that our new water filtration facility went online, so that was a huge capital improvement project. And then, our next big water project that's coming down the line, do you want to talk about that at all?
I have Jason Upton here for that. No, and you can talk about the water filtration facility better.
So what year did the new water filtration facility come online?
So it's been in operation now for going on 4 years now, so it's not as new as
Okay.
it once was, but it's still going good.
Well, compared to the previous one was 103 years old.
So, yeah, so we did a water treatment plant project. Our water treatment plant was over 100 years old. It's kind of like what they talk about with some of these old buildings. We looked at it, the cost to bring it up to date to a treatment facility. It was costing us more to keep it going than it was to build a new one. When you're talking millions of dollars, that's hard to believe, but it is when you look at what is being expended on upkeep and also compliance. We were still treating and maintaining good quality water, but it was taking a lot of resources and a lot of manpower to do that, and some of the parts we couldn't buy. So that was why the decision was made to build the new treatment facility up on 16th Avenue. Some of the other projects, outside of mandates from the EPA are lead. There's PFAS that's out there. And just to clarify on that, because I think it was one of Judith's, someone in your ward. So there is a push for PFAS right now. We were tested by the state. So the state went around throughout the state of Illinois and tested the waters of Illinois. And there was some places that had high numbers. Ours were not quite as high. Ours were, I think Illinois they set the PFAS level at 2 compared to some other states, that are 14, 25. It's kind of not consistent throughout the United States as far as that regulation. I think our tests are like 2.6. Ultimately, I wanted to make the comment that, we treat the water. We don't put the chemicals in the Mississippi River. So we do have some things in the process where we're trying to figure out what kind of treatment process would be needed to reduce those PFAS numbers, which are very low in Rock Island, Moline, and East Moline. We're working to curb the amount of PFAS that might be put in upstream. But I think this resident that you might have talked to, called the EPA Region 5, which is in Chicago, and they told him that we refused a particular company to come in and do testing. We are doing testing quarterly, and we have seen the numbers decrease, which is amazing, when they start clamping down on some of those chemicals that are being put into the water. Because PFAS goes back to Teflon, and it's in Gore-Tex. It's on any kind of water retardant. But we are doing quarterly testing. We are working with other communities, neighboring communities, because it is the same source water of the Mississippi. So we're working with neighboring communities to try to figure out, okay, what do we do to reduce this? The problem is with PFAS is it's a forever chemical, they call it. Meaning that it's hard to get rid of. You have to burn it at such high temperatures. So if we remove it from the water, now it's in our sediment that we've removed, and now we send that to the sewer plant, and now the sewer plant returns it back to the river. So it's not as easy as just filtering it out. There's other complications that are involved with that. But we are doing testing on PFAS. We're working with other communities. We've got the lead program that we're working with Augustana on. Our next big project for the water plant is, you're all familiar with the domes, which is the storage facility up there. Again, it's aged. It doesn't meet a lot of codes. We are still making good quality water, as you'll see by your quality reports. If any of you happen to read your quality water reports, we are producing good quality water in Rock Island. I think it's some of the best. I've been in the business for a long time, and I think Rock Island has some of the best water. We did get an award for some of the best water, yay. So, our domes are gonna have a rehab project that we are working on currently with that. It was listed as an ARPA project, but then the amount that was budgeted with ARPA certainly won't cover what is suggested on that. It's with an engineering firm right now looking at ways we can improve that storage facility. On the wastewater side, we've got a digester project. With all infrastructure, it's easy, to say, oh, we're not going to fill that pothole because we ain't got the money. But with infrastructure, it's a little different. As years go on, you can keep kicking the can, but your costs increase, and ultimately, you have to do something with your infrastructure at some point. So we have a digester project that we're currently working on at the wastewater plant, and also a pump project, which is the influent pumps out at our Southwest treatment plant. We maintain 2 sewage plants in Rock Island and a water treatment plant. So those are kind of some big projects that we're working on. Public Works, we are constantly looking at our budget. We're constantly trying to keep rates low. When you think you've solved the problems, hey, we're going to raise rates a little bit, and then we have things such as COVID that increase our chemical costs by 50 to 100% in some cases. So, what money you think you're going to have to use towards something then has to get used to cover the costs of maintenance and the treatment facility in itself, along with all of our crews that are out there working, replacing hydrants and those things that we don't talk about that spill water onto the streets and curbs. So, I don't know how much more detail on any of the projects.
That was good. Tim, can we tell if there's anybody on the Google Meet line, anybody virtually who wants to call in, who's on the call with a question or comment? Nope, okay. Chief McLeod, do you want to speak about what's going on in the police department? I know we just swore in some new candidates, and we've been hiring community service officers, and I don't know if you want to talk about the license plate reader program.
I heard somebody mention earlier, just a little briefly, about stolen vehicles. As far as crime trends that are going on, that definitely has seen an uptick lately. It kind of ebbs and flows depending on who's involved in that, and typically this is a crime involving juveniles, depending on whether or not they're out and about. So the license plate reader system that, as was mentioned earlier, was funded through the ARPA funds. That has gone a long way towards helping us to locate some of these vehicles. What we did was we were able to take these license plate reader cameras and place them strategically around the city, so that whenever a stolen vehicle comes into the city of Rock Island, we get a notification. It's a relatively new system for us. I believe we just got all of them installed. We've been working with it for about a month or two, getting used to it. All the officers have the ability to have that pulled right up as an alert on their computers in the squad cars, or their phones even, or their computers in the office, and then our dispatchers will notify us. Yes, for the most part they are, but what we did was, to start with, is that they're mostly on entrances into the city, so that as someone driving a stolen vehicle comes into the Rock Island, maybe through the Centennial Bridge, or even through Moline, those are strategically located there at pretty much every entrance, 11th Street, you name it. That way we'll be notified. So that's definitely helping us, yes.
Will there be any tracking of, say, with the use of this new device, the incidence of car chases within the city, such as that?
No, I wouldn't say that the system is used for that. It's very rare that we get into a police pursuit. We have very strict criteria for that. And so when those things happen, there is a lot of things that are going in motion with that as far as documentation. So no necessarily need to track that through a system. We definitely track that through all the software and everything that we have. Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I was just gonna mention,
course.
next Tuesday, June 27th, we will be having a downtown public meeting to talk about the improvements, take public input for the improvements that we're discussing. This is the area of the plaza, the downtown plaza, 18th Street, 1st to 3rd Avenue. You may have seen some media releases a couple weeks ago, a month ago, looking at a dog park and some other features. You know, we've just completed the new parking lot, but we're going to have our design engineers, some architects, city staff, and we'll be discussing those improvements and taking public input to hear what residents want to see and other stakeholders. So 6 o'clock at the Holiday Inn, June 27th.
Great, great, thank you. Oh, and for those who are interested in following along with the downtown project, I believe Downtown Director Jack Cullen will be presenting the budget for downtown and the work plan this coming Monday at the City Council study session that starts at 5 o'clock too. So, any other questions or comments?
If I can comment?
Sure.
Citizen of the Year award nomination process has just opened, and Rock Island is the only city here in the Quad Cities that gives out these annual awards the way that we recognize our businesses and individuals in this manner. So I think that's very unique and special to Rock Island. There are 8 categories that we're seeking to honor people in. I'll try to name them all. Individual, business, organization, nonprofit, or church, educator, so that can be a teacher, paraprofessional, a dean, or a principal, youth, and that would be a student, grades 6 through 12, employee, that would be city employee, and
Veterans.
veteran. Did I name 8? Anyways, these are all listed on the city website, rigov.org. And if you, there's a special link for it where you can fill out the form and you can click the, you can nominate as many different people as you want. You're not limited to one nomination per person. Right, thank you very much, Tim. And there's a link where you can just autofill the form online, and it's very easy. The nomination forms come to me. And then we do have a committee in place where we sit down with the committee, and that is all of last year's winners. They're on the committee, myself, Samantha, and 2 alderpersons. So that would be Alderwoman Jenny Swanson and Alderman Bill Healy. They are also on the committee. The committee votes and decides who the winners are. They're recognized at the August 28th City Council meeting. And then all of the 8 winners are asked to march in the annual Labor Day Parade. And there will be an overall winner, and that person will serve as the parade grand marshal. So if you know of anybody who is, a wonderful volunteer for the community, if they just always are very giving and put themselves out there, if they just kind of go the extra mile, the more nominations we can get in, the better.
Okay, so before we leave for tonight, I do have one final surprise. Now, some of you, when you came in, you put your name on a colored slip of paper. If you haven't, raise your hand so Samantha can bring you a slip of paper. We've got some prizes. Really, Mike? We've got some prizes that we're going to raffle off. And while those people are filling, Dave, while those people are filling out their slips, I just want to thank you all for coming, especially those who are also watching online. This meeting has been recorded, so it will get posted tomorrow, and I'll be sending out the link. If any of you are not on my email list, there's a form on the table too for you to fill out so that you can get on my list. I want to thank all of our speakers tonight and our Augustana team, and they'll be staying to help you. A big thank you to Pee Wee's for baking the peach cobbler on his day off. Feel free to take a piece home with you if you want. And Are we ready? So the first prize that we have, yeah, just fold them. We have a visit for a family of 4 to Whitewater Junction provided by our Parks Department. Has everybody got their name in there? Do you want to pull one, Todd? Mary Ellen Cunningham.
Here, I'll go get,
Okay. And now we also have the new YMCA in town on 30th Street that's a partner with our Watts Midtown Library. They gave me guest passes for you to go and try out the new Y. I'm a member. It's fabulous. I go for my Silver Sneakers classes. So I'm going to be, I have 6, but I'm giving them out in pairs so that you can bring your spouse, a relative, a friend, a neighbor with you as well. Malcolm. Julie Heber. You won YMCA guest pass. David Van Lanigan. Dave. It's a great facility. Judy Beasley Pattison.
Gotta let Samantha catch up.
Yeah, we gotta let Samantha catch up. Judy, you want to raise your hand so Samantha can come and get these? Okay, thanks.
How many more you got?
2 more.
2 more? All right.
Isabel.
Can't go to the Y.
Yes, you can. Isabel. And Tom Sparkman. Well, he left already.
Can you
so
win and
take another one.
you're not present?
Must be present. Pete. Pete. Pete 1, 2. Yeah, so you can take the kids.
There you go.
Yes. So thank you so much for being so engaged. The 3rd Ward is awesome in that regard. So thank you. Feel free to, I have a few cards left. If you don't have my card already, and if you have any questions, never hesitate to call me or email me about any issues. Just share your thoughts or a problem you might be having. Okay, and we'll all be hanging around for a few minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good
Find out
job.
about that fawn and let me know.
Yeah, that's what I was saying too.